program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. My name is Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator and supervisor.
And my super big brother.
Yeah, still my favorite role.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back.
Yeah, to you too.
And thank you for joining us. If you're listening on the radio in South Florida, we are on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. I guess you already know that if you're listening to one of those stations. Mm-hmm. And we're streaming live on Facebook. If you're watching us there, hello.
Hello, and if you're watching us, you would know that too.
Thank you for joining us. And please
welcome.
Hit those likes and share buttons.
Yes, as often as possible.
Yes.
And we are going to have a guest tonight, so I think the phone lines will be tied up. So normally we do like to have people call in. Maybe before we start with that, if you want to get a quick call in at 888-565-1470.
1470?
Yes, indeed. But you can also submit via Facebook as well.
Yeah, shoot us an email or
right. And for people that might be interested in sex therapy and training with Modern Sex Therapy Institute.
I always forget. Yes, I can be reached by email, I guess, is best. Ricky at modernsextherapy.com, or a text or call to 561-809-1080. Mm-hmm. And for any therapists or medical professionals or sexologists who may be joining us and are interested in continuing education or training to be certified as a sex therapist, a sexuality counselor, or a sexuality educator, go to www.modernsextherapyinstitutes.com.
There you go.
Thank you for reminding me that.
Yes, and then as we travel more and more, and just a lot of the stuff we've been doing and the things that we have planning on for the rest of the year and through 2020, it just becomes more and more, I think, glaringly obvious that most professionals need this training. People, I think, are also, getting a better understanding of the fact that sex therapy is something that is accessible to them. And it is something that I think can really benefit a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Try to figure this stuff out. That's one of the things that we've been talking about for how many years. Just the way most people learn and the way they develop their template for sexual behavior. It's just kind of figure it out with the overriding expectation that we should know this stuff.
Yeah, right. And of course, kids always dealing with the pressure of having to be as cool as is reasonably possible at their level of cool potential. So they can't ask if they don't know something. They just have to assume and act like they do. Right.
And over the years, how many times have we done presentations where may have given sort of a demonstration on how to use a condom as part of that? Yeah. And always get, especially adolescent boys, but I've had adult men as well, that have that kind of look around, make sure nobody's watching, nobody's going to hear what they're saying, and just want to make a point of saying thank you for showing that because I really didn't know, and I can't say that I don't know. And how much of that is really, I think, what people are dealing with. Again, we're coming back to this idea tonight of sexual health, which we never really
our
left.
Ongoing theme, right?
We've never really left it.
Ranted a little bit about Lisa Ling's porn crusading episode last week.
Exactly, which is a part of it because again, as we talk about understanding
that's the same
porn,
part of you're supposed to know, but you can't ask.
Right.
So how do people find out in this day and age? They go online.
That's right.
And invariably, the de facto sex ed becomes porn.
That's right. So this idea of sexual literacy as part of sexual health, it's not that people aren't really doing it. It's sort of like, we can complain that people aren't reading, but I think we have to complain about what they're actually reading.
Right.
That's really the problem. And again, coming back to that notion of porn being that de facto educator. Right? And again, thanks again, parents and teachers. I'm not letting that one go.
Yeah.
But that's really the result, which is why it's also really exciting to have our guest tonight, which I think we're just excited anyway whenever we get
Sure.
a chance
Any
to hang
chance
out with
at
her
all.
and spend time.
Yes.
Rochelle Frabata, you want to give a quick little mention?
Well, we know Rochelle forever through our ASEC Peeps and our annual family
Speak of the
reunion
devil, there she is.
conference. There she is. Miss Frabota. How are you, dear?
Gentlemen.
How are you? Welcome.
You. Nice to see you even more. Hello.
Hello,
We're so happy to
hello.
finally have you on Sex Talk.
That's right.
Oh,
Rochelle
pleasure.
is at the other Miami University. Of course, we're in South Florida, so it's not University of Miami. She's at Miami University in Ohio, in Oxford,
Correct.
Ohio.
Yes.
Very academic named town.
Lots of shoes
know.
as well. Yeah.
We do what we can on the academics.
Yes. So a stellar sexuality educator and supervisor, trainer of new educators, and new author,
Yes, indeed.
co-author.
Yes, indeed.
Of-
And a rocker as well as a roller.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yes. Nighttime job, the day job. You got to balance it all out. That's
That's
rock and
right.
roll. I've got the sex and rock and roll part. That's it. So, yeah.
Indeed. And
And-
new author. Congrats.
I don't have a copy of your book. It's The Gender Revolution and New Sexual Health, celebrating unlimited diversity of the human sexuality hypercube.
That's it.
That's the
right.
first question.
Right.
What the hell's a hypercube?
You really need the book to read it. That's what I'm going to say. The other two authors, Fred Peterson and Jill Bly, also longtime sex teach therapists, clinicians here in Ohio. I know that Fred's been a part of ASAC for a long time, and Jill, back in the 70s, co-created one of the original rape crisis centers, which is now an organization called Women Helping Women. So these are the people that I hung out with and wrote with for a hot minute. And the hypercube is Fred's baby. He's really tried to take these identities that we tend to put on a continuum, and he's really made them 3D and presented the idea of expression, identity, and orientation in this hypercube. And I would love to have a visual of that for you. But I guess I would just say holler and take a look at the book, and that would be best. So.
Terrific.
So when we talk about gender issues as they do relate to sexual health, would you consider have been some kind of gender bias in the way sexual health has been talked about, and whether it's classes and education or just the idea of sexual health? Where have we kind of been missing that point?
Sure. And, I don't know that we've ever had this conversation before, but I know, like, back in the 90s when we were doing risk reduction and, we were attacking, quote unquote, the public health issues of unplanned teen pregnancy and just starting to put some letters together like L, G, I think a B got in there. Eventually the T came in, right?
Right.
I think, I can recall this almost 30-year evolution of putting gender stuff together with identity and orientation and expression. And I think what we did, and I think what we've done a pretty good job at, is creating curriculum and lesson plans and material for folks who are marginalized, which is great. I remember specifically talking to L and Gs and Bs and Ts about sexuality because nobody else was. But interestingly enough, guys, we really kind of left out the white dudes and the dudes who maybe have some resources. And, interestingly enough, I think we really need to do some more work as far as sexual health and wellness goes with that, I'll say, privileged population. So if you're really asking the question, where do we need to focus a little bit more, I think it's there. What do you guys think?
Interesting.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, and I never would have thought of it that way.
It comes up often that even just in general, the phrases sexual and reproductive health almost always make those guys go, ugh, women's issues, here we go again. Like men don't have sexual needs and sexual health needs. It's kind of crazy to just assume that, oh, it's Planned Parenthood stuff, that's lady plumbing stuff, that we're going to leave the room now.
Right. Chick pieces parts.
Yeah, and I think it's been kind of
Wonder Woman over her shoulder.
Yes, indeed. Right. And I think, sexual health, as I kind of been, looking at where we need to make some of these shifts, for me, I think it's also traditionally been very obviously heterosexist, because the emphasis has been on pregnancy prevention and, all of those things that come along with unintended pregnancy. Certainly the STI prevention, but it's still primarily been in a heterosexual type of context, with the exception of HIV, which is really more homophobic.
Yeah.
And I think
I buy what you're selling.
And I think everything else has been kind of just neglected.
But even when diversity finally came into the discussion, it's still, to Rochelle's point, it's still, I remember...
But it's still the same kinds of things. It's
the same
STI
people
prevention
who
and pregnancy prevention.
themselves from, so now it's just not just women's issues, but now they're talking about people of color and sexual minorities.
Right.
And, I remember Paul Joannides, another mutual friend, when he was talking about his target audience for the Guide to Getting It On, was mostly cisgendered, heterosexual, white college students, because they were the ones typically not getting the message.
Right. No, I would say...
look at who's been... I'm sorry
kind
to
of
interrupt you.
surprising.
Look who's always traditionally been involved in the sexual health clubs and, those kind
Absolutely.
It's always girls and marginalized...
Absolutely,
folks.
And I guess the point that I'm kind of making is, I think a lot of people would be very surprised to hear that this is, in a way, a neglected. When you talk about cisgendered white guys in particular, right? How are they marginalized? How are they a neglected group? But they really are.
They're just not getting the message because they turn it off because they think it's about all those others. Right? The others. We've said this too, and Rochelle, I'd love to hear your take on, since you brought it up there. Now that's the 21st century, and everybody's so evolving and woke. So now it's the alphabet soup of LGBTQIQA2 GNC, right? So, to Larry's point about the continued othering. Too often that alphabet soup does not include an H for heterosexual. So
agreed. I think there's a lot of people left out. I'm really digging the whole SOGI right now, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, because of the alphabet soup stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, in this era of inclusion, and I know I do my best to be inclusive. It's a goal of ours, right, since the 90s.
Yeah.
Having said that, we're still leaving folks out. I know one of the things I wanted to beef up was in my lectures at Miami, in my large lecture sex ed class, I want to beef up asexuality. I unintentionally often forget, or I'm not speaking, because, 20-year-olds being sexually active, that's the focus. We got to get this material in to order to assist to have information to have outcomes that are wanted and not unwanted. And wait a minute, what about asexuality? And disabilities is also one of my things.
Right.
So, definitely we need to beef up, in particular, I think sexual health and wellness for our cisgendered hetero white dudes. Testicular self-exams don't get talked about enough, right?
No, not at all.
And the only time anybody hears the word prostate is when their uncle or their grandfather has a problem with it, right?
Or when they're 40 and the urologist comes at them with a big, thick finger.
Super huge, thick, greasy.
Butcher hands.
Yes.
Snapping a rubber glove.
So we got to add those things to the conversation, but we still can't let our alphabet soup folks go, and the folks with disabilities, and in particular, we have a large Chinese population. at Miami University, and I also, right? So what's inclusion? Inclusion is making sure that language actually gets translated. I'm pretty sure when people are learning the English language, prostate, fallopian tubes,
vaginismus if they're Chinese.
Vaginismus, right? I'm just not sure those are the most translated words.
No, absolutely. So here's kind of a follow-up question then, or a continuation.
Mm-hmm.
We seem to have this ongoing, even though we've gotten maybe, I don't know if we got better at it or we just did more of it, this targeting of the message that we keep, I think, struggling with. Is, in fact, our real issue the targeting of the message, or is it the message itself? Right? Is that what we really need to focus on changing? Maybe instead of how do we specifically apply the idea to these individual groups of people, is there a message that may fit, I think, any kind of application? Is that where we need to look?
That's interesting. I mean, I immediately went to methods in my head. So how are we delivering information? And so, as an educator, that's where I went. But I'm also, I tend to go to culture. So I'm wondering if the real issue, maybe a step backwards, is that we aren't talking enough. Weren't you guys talking about this last week on your show? The idea that we just don't talk enough about sexuality, in particular healthy sexuality. Parents aren't necessarily giving accurate and helpful information to their kids, right?
Yeah.
Certainly no talk of pleasure.
Is sex ed. I'm sorry, Ricky?
I just said there's certainly no talk of pleasure.
Right. So I wonder, Larry, if the real issue isn't the idea of making this culturally accessible, and then forming messages out of just the need to teach, not necessarily the need to raise comfort level or the need to introduce ideas. So I don't know. I'm not sure where you wanted to go with it, but
I don't think I really wanted to go anywhere particular with it. It's really just actively musing, because I often wonder, even just as a comparison. Something that I've been talking a lot about just in doing a lot of work with seniors. We talk about seniors, and, it's funny, whenever I'm doing anything that has to do with sexuality and intimacy with seniors, a lot of people, not the seniors themselves, but a lot of people's first reaction to that is, you're talking about the epidemic of STIs or HIV. And, one of the things that I've been talking against, if you will, a lot, is that the messaging, when we're talking to seniors, we're talking to older adults, especially about things like STIs and HIV in particular, we're giving the same message to an 80-year-old that we're giving to an 18-year-old. And it's our only message seems to be condoms. And I'm saying in my way of looking at this, that's a mistake. That's not the right message. Not saying it's not appropriate, but that's not the right message. That really isn't the lead foot. So just looking at how we're having, I think, similar issues with other types of populations, I'm wondering if it's really not a targeting issue, but an actual messaging issue. And
I'm hearing you. That's so interesting. It's so 90s too, right? Lead with the condom, prevent the STIs.
Yeah.
Let me share just a quick story with you. So I'm doing some work in Oklahoma with a group of folks with developmental disabilities, and the moniker is self-advocates. So folks within a particular group who are intentionally advancing conversation. And what we're doing is working on training on how to be a sexuality educator or a sexpert, and we're also working on curricula, right? And so in the midst of those conversations, there's a lot of dialogue, and there's some conferences, and here's the punchline. The thing that I'm taking away from my 3 experiences in Oklahoma right now, where we're doing really quality sex-positive work, with, of course, wellness and health being the focus, is that the only thing I keep hearing is about sexual violence. I'm not hearing anything about sexual pleasure, to a point you made earlier, Ricky, but I'm not hearing anything about grown people who have lived lives on the margin, and for many reasons, having healthy sexual experiences. And so that's a piece of dialogue that's missing. So I think, I don't, condom what? At this point, I just want to talk about what a healthy relationship might look like for somebody who doesn't have the opportunity or hasn't been allowed to engage. Sex or no, just the idea of sitting and talking under the stars and holding hands. And so I'm hearing it. I think message is so important, but message in context of particular experiences is probably that culture piece that I was thinking about.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it seems no matter what, we can't escape the framing of talking about sexual behavior, or actually talking about sexuality in terms of something that we do as opposed to something that we are.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very key point. I really appreciate that. Yeah, you're right. The whole idea of people who don't think they like what I do because I teach sex.
Yeah.
That's such a small part of what I get to teach.
Yes,
and I think we would all agree, I'd love to have an 8-hour workshop on sex. That would be fabulous. And that's not what we get to do much of, right?
Unfortunately, no.
Right. So,
Yeah, Jeb, when he was our governor, famously said that he did not approve of what we did at Planned Parenthood because he didn't think it was appropriate to teach young people how to have sex.
Right.
That was truly one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in misunderstanding what sexuality educators do.
Well, remember, too, we were also told, I think by one of his aides at the time, that he is going for all this abstinence-only stuff in spite of the fact that he is aware of all the research. But you know what? Research doesn't trump being a Catholic. So he's going to cast his vote for what he will admit doesn't work. That he knows this. Right? So yeah, this is the
culture,
world in which we live and work in.
Yes.
Man, does anybody ever tell a plumber not to use that wrench? I mean, why do we get this pushback, right? I mean,
yep.
I love what I do. I love that I've done it for so long, and we all have job security. It feels often like, I'm still teaching the same thing I did teach 20 years ago. And I feel like, to the point you just made, it's the folks who have a different agenda, agenda that doesn't support identity, it doesn't support inclusion, it doesn't support personal agency.
That's where your book is so important, and I'm not just plugging it because you're on the show. I had the chance to review a handful of chapters, and it's sex ed on that much more gut intuitive feelings level than just learning factoids and
that's what we
them back, right?
That's definitely exactly. That's what's needed, right? And I want to, because we have a tendency to always run out of time and run short. So before we do, I want to ask you, since you've also been doing this for a good period of time, and you've been teaching college classes for about 20 years or so. Is that correct?
25 in college and 27 total.
Okay.
I'm old, you guys. I'm so old.
Oh, please.
Not as old as us.
Still got you beat. So what have you seen that's different? Right? How have you seen in your students in terms of how they're present in your classes, their understanding, what they're coming in with? Have you seen an evolution over the last 25 years? I
have. What I'm so pleased to report, I've been 10, 11 years at the same university. My 20-year-olds are not feeling so much shame and guilt anymore. It's there. But it's there for different reasons, I think. But I think this idea of embracing one's sexual ideas and behaviors and pleasure included is really more at the forefront of the conversation as opposed to digging through all this negative, ucky, gooky self-talk that they've been that's been imposed upon them. So I'm seeing a much more sex-positive culture. and clearly hashtag Me Too, as well as all our conversations around effective communication skills. I think that might feed it a little bit as well. But no, we have great conversations. 80 minutes twice a week. I appreciate my 20-year-olds. I'm learning a lot from them.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And in terms of topics, do you find that they're more keyed in on the shame and guilt aside?
Right.
Are they keyed in on maybe certain issues, in the last several years that maybe in the earlier years we didn't really talk much about or hear people talk much about, unless we brought it up?
So every semester I do a short survey, and one of the questions is, what do you want to learn the most about? And there's a closed list that they can choose from, and then they can add their own ideas. And I'll say, my memory says about the last 6 years, healthy relationships and effective communication skills are in the top 3. And then, I won't lie, anal always comes up. We've got to be talking about anal more.
Yeah.
And the idea of pleasure, like what is supposed to feel good. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm still teaching some pretty basic anatomy, because that's not getting done in K through 12, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you have to.
They may be
do that
hipper and
work
more
first.
sex positive, but they still don't know much about the clitoris.
Right, right. Or how these things actually work.
Yeah.
Right.
The thing that always blows my mind is I talk, and this is very gender specific, which is where we started, but I'll ask the women in class, what do you do with a glass at a party? Do you leave a drink unattended? And of course we all know you don't do that, right? And so we have a little bit of conversation about that. And then I ask them about a birth control pill and how does it work in the body. And so my teaching point is, you'll take a pill from a doctor, prescribed, that you don't know how it works, and yet you will be hypervigilant about protecting an open drink at a party. Now, it may seem weird, but my point is, if you want to be concerned about what goes in your body, why don't we understand how birth control pills work?
Right.
Why do we just take them? So, and that's usually a conversation starter.
Nice.
And there's very quick awareness.
Nice. So,
Conversation starter, and it has to take us into a conversation ender.
That's right.
I'm so
Unfortunately,
sorry.
we got the music
The
that's
half hour
starting.
always flies by, but yeah.
Totally. Nice to see you guys.
Oh,
Really
same
great
here,
to see
same
you.
here.
Thanks for joining us.
It's such a pleasure. Really appreciate it. And we're going to talk soon about submitting a proposal for supervision.
All right.
Maybe a proposal
time.
for Palm Springs.
Yeah.
So
Can't wait
that's
to
our
see
time
you.
for this week. Thanks
Thanks
for joining
so
us
much.
on Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Thanks to our guest, Rochelle Fraboda. And we'll be here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Yes, indeed. Have a great week. Good night.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.